Hey there, folks. It's Reem again with another Conquest, the Last Argument of Kings video. I thought I'd do just a quick update on the 100 Kingdoms patch from May 12th. I thought I'd just go over that section since it's the faction I'm most familiar with in the game. I could also potentially do Nords or City-States if there's interest for that, but for today we're just going to stick with the 100 Kingdoms. Um, just to preface this, I think overall the patch log was very good. And as we have it up here, you can see that the developers kind of left some of their notes in italics here. And what they're basically saying is that they're largely happy with 100 Kingdoms after the rework that happened earlier. And they're just tweaking some things during this patch log. And I largely agree that 100 Kingdoms after their rework, it was a little rocky with the community when it was first announced, but as time has gone on, people are really happy. I think overall with 100 Kingdoms, there are a couple units that people are like, maybe could see some tweaks, and I think they addressed some of that in this patch log. So let's go ahead and go through that. First up, we have some masteries that were changed and heirlooms. These were all great ones. First off, we have the Flesh Cleaver. Its 15 points was 25, and what that does, it ignores Hardened. So if you have a character that's like Cleave 2 and you're fighting, a Talos with Hardened 2, you now ignore the Hardened, so your Cleave goes through. So I believe the Order of the Errant to the Shield has Cleave 2. I think the Noble Lord, um, the Crusading Noble Lord has Cleave 2. You can get Cleave 1 on the Noble Lord on foot or on the Mounted Noble Lord. So I think if you have 15 points on your list and they're in a big body of something that isn't going to die, just making them that much more killy. There's a lot of evasion in the game. Um, so just having a 10-point decrease, you don't feel as bad when you come up against one of those units that has evasion to fall back on. Next, we have Standard of Steel. That just dropped 10 points, another solid change. It's a very expensive heirloom, but it does give Unyielding and Dread. Um, as long as veteran, the unit that it's in is veteran, it gets both of those. And Unyielding just means you can't be inspired unless you are always inspired, and then yielding is you can't seize the point while any of the units with Unyielding is on the objective point. So very strong keywords. Dropped at 40 points. Great change. Art of War, that's essentially, I get to say pass. Like, you can skip an activation. Was 30 down 25. Um, maybe you'll see a little bit more use. I think it was getting some use, but just 5 points off. You got 5 more points on your list now. A big change here. Heirloom was Armor of Dominion. Um, it now reads the regiment this character is attached to does not suffer penalties to its defense characteristic as a result of cleave, armor piercing, and smite, while remaining the same amount of points, which I believe is 30 or 40. Either way, really good change in rules. It used to be it was only in stands that was contact with the character that had this, and as such, it didn't affect armor piercing as well. So now you can make like a super unkillable block. So you have a Gilded Legion with Imperial Officer in there, like 7 blocks and all, and they're not going to get chipped away with armor piercing, or they're not going to get cleaved to death, or they're not going to get smited by like an abomination. So really good change. I expect 100 Kingdom um, players that are running big Household Guard blocks or Gilded Legion blocks. This will be one of the top contenders for heirlooms to throw into the unit, just to give it that much more resiliency. The Archangel was changed a little bit. That's the aspect of the Avenger, which is the sword variant. I'm happy about that because I think I'm going to build the sword variant. I just like the look of the sword variant better. They increase the auto charge. So what the aspect of the Avenger does is as your first activation, it used to be you could charge 12 inches automatically and ignore hindering terrain and stuff that would, prevent your charge from getting impacts, and you would get 7 free smite hits, and then you get your impact hits, and then that would be the end of your activation. They bumped it up to 8 hits, and they bumped it up to 14 inches instead of 12. I think it makes it a little bit more compelling. Um, it's hard because the other version has shield, and that brings you up to defense 4. But I think this is just enough of a change that you'll actually see more play of the sword, where everyone was like, well, shield is obviously better. Even if you don't get shield all the time, like, it's not that hard to shoot a monster base in the side or flank it. I think this will give it a little bit more compelling reason to take the sword variant, and I'm excited for that. Overall, very positive change. Crusaders just dropped down 10 points. I think that is good. As they kind of said, a lot of their synergy was already tied into characters. So, you know, just drop them down 10 points, give them a little bit more variance in the faction for point cost. Overall, good change. I think you'll see more Crusaders, maybe outside of just the Feast Priest block, because I believe before this you'd see like some amount of Crusaders with a Feast Priest. Next up, really like this change. Mounted Squires, they dropped down 10 points. Awesome. I think that was the main problem with them. People are like, they don't kill that much. They're fast. Not that defensive, but down 10 points, 130 points. You get a lot of screening for that. They can harass unprotected other like range units, late units, or if you play really cagey with them, save them to the mid game and get some decent flank off with their opportunists. Down 10 points, think it's a good change. You might see a little bit more of them as it's at that 140 point cost. Um, Next change here is the Household Knights. They went up 10 points just because they were doing very well. I think that is fair. You see a lot of Household Knights in the Mountain Noble Lord or in the Noble Lords on Foot's band, and in that case they go up to Cleave 3. And if they're in, the aura of either of the Lords, they get the reroll 6s on defense and attacks. And they're just very effective, D3 with shield, rerolling 6s, so you're like effectively defense 4, rerolling 6s. Like if you're fighting stuff that doesn't have cleave, or you line break or armor piercing, or you're not being attacked from the side, they tank pretty well, and they have a good volume of attacks back at like 5 attacks. If they inspire, it's 5 attacks hitting on 4s, rerolling 6s. Good volume of attacks, and then pretty defensive. So going up 10 points, totally fine. And I still think you'll see plenty of them because so far we've had a lot of point decreases. So funny enough, those decreases are just going to get eaten up by keeping your Household Knights in. They modified March of the Faithful Army special rule. So instead of a flat bonus, it's an additive bonus. This means that it can be layered. Like the Crusader Noble Lord gives +1 Indomitable to all of the units in his regiment, and then that would not stack with the March of the Faithful, because if you have an additive and a flat, they won't add together to 2. I think there are some people that were playing it together like they would add up to 2, when in reality it should have stayed at 1. But now it kind of does as what you expect, and the Crusader Noble Lord's Warband will now be getting Indomitable 2 on a lot of their units, because March of the Faithful will now apply along with his ability. So you stack that with Oblivious and some of the other things that the faction can get, and I think you're going to get a couple of big blocks of infantry potentially that will be almost Old Dominion like, where they're going to be like Oblivious, Indomitable 2. Like, it's going to be hard to do resolve damage to some of these blocks. Crimson Tower was the next thing changed, down 10 points. Great for me. I like Crimson Tower. And I think just to help distinct them between Ashen Dawn, this helps even more. Because now the difference, I believe, is like 50 points between the two. And Crimson Tower suffer from they don't anvil as well. So if someone jumps you and just long bomb charges into you, you're not going to do as much damage, because they're really more of a shock cav. They need to charge, so they can get tied up and become ineffective that way. But at 50 points less than the Ashen Dawn, you definitely are paying for the extra ability that you get out of Ashen Dawn, so it definitely distincts the two more. Skitarii with the next change, they just went up to 5 attacks. I think that's a good change. Skitarii were one of the ones. Mountain Squires and Skitarii were the two that I wanted some changes for. And Mountain Squires got the point decrease, 5 attacks in Skitarii, I think is a good thing to try with them. I was hoping for a point decrease because they're 160. It was just, you compare like the old Household Knight at 160 versus Skitarii, and it was really hard to take Skitarii in your Thief's feudal lists, or at least it was for me. But now having 5 attacks with a little bit of cleave, they have evasion. It definitely makes the unit more unique, and therefore I think I will be running a unit of Skitarii in my Feast feudal list just to give them a try. Get those volume of attacks with the cleave. Household Guard, they're just getting their Arm Master down 15 points. I believe Arm Master is the one that gives them +1 Clash. So they go from Clash 2 to Clash 3. It's the one that if you have a big block of Household Guard, which is the only real way that you see them played, you always take the Arms Master. So that going down 10 points, I think is a fine change. Next change is Steel Legion. They gain Harden 1. We're going to talk more about this at the end, but right now, the Imperial Officer every round could give 2 units a variant of modifiers, and one of them was Harden 1. So it's not like the Steel Legion couldn't get Harden 1 pretty easily before. So it's an interesting change to do just Harden 1 on Steel Legion. Gilded Legion were the other thing that changed. They went down 10 points. I think that's good. I mean, Gilded Legion were already the favorite of the 2 heavy legions. Dropping points, I think, is going to make them even more eye-catching than Steel Legion. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. That'll be the end of. Yep, that's Aspires now. That's the end of the 100 Kingdoms patch. So overall, I like all the changes. I think they're all really good. I think they targeted units that were performing just a little bit too well, like the Household Knights, pumped them up, and then they just decreased a lot of things across the board just to buff them up ever so slightly. I will say, if I did have to pick the weakest unit in the Codex or in the army list, like when we come to the next patch log, which unit I think is everyone going to be thinking, oh, this unit needs to be changed for sure because it's still not performing. I think it's still going to be the Steel Legion. I love the lore. I love the models. I want to run them. I'll probably run them for fun, and I think that's the only reason you're going to see them in lists. It's because they want to run them for fun, or maybe they really need a mainstay unlock and they have a Steel Legion they want to use. The main problem that we're having right now with Steel Legion is, well, it's kind of a problem with heavies as well. It's like, with heavies, you really want them to hit the board, make an impact. They're usually expensive. They're usually game changers. And Steel Legion are very good. There's nothing wrong with their attacks profiles or anything. Like Cleave 2 with their attacks, their Clash, solid. Problem is, Guild Legion are their main competitor, and Guild Legion come in a big block usually, which means you can put an officer in there, and you can give them like the Armor of Dominion to really buff them up. And you get this big, unmovable, unshiftable block that's going to do a bunch of wounds, super tanky, good target for Chapter Mage healing. And the Steel Legion is like an MSU. So, Hardened 1 will help now, so it can't be picked off by, if you think in the mirror match, like Mercenary Crossbows, Longbows, Chapter Mage with Firebolt, all this range damage with, armor piercing, just chipping away at Steel Legion. But I don't think it's gonna really shift the needle much. I don't think you're gonna see much play, just because the heavy slot is too contested right now. You want to make sure they come in So you're probably taking the officer and you're throwing in the Gilded Region for forward force, and whatever you're pairing up with the Imperial is probably going to bring in a heavy. What do I mean by that is, like, let's say you're doing Imperial Feast. You're probably going to bring an Archangel. So you pick your Archangel as your free, and then you'll forward force with the officer to get your Gilded Legion in. If you're doing Imperial and Orders, which don't really work, because they don't synergize well, but Orders has, Crimson Tower and Ashen Dawn as heavies, so that's going to want to take the free one in. The only one it potentially works with, I guess, is if you have, like, Feudal Imperial, because the Feudals don't really have any heavies that want to come in, so you could bring, like, an MSU, a Steel Legion in for free, and then bring the Gilded Legion in with forward force on the Imperial Officer. That might be where you see the Steel Legion. But even then, I think you have better options because you're going to want to do, I think, just other things of the Imperial Officer's Warband. It has a lot of contention in there for, um, Imperial Rangers. Um, I guess, no, maybe I'm talking myself into it. Maybe in Feudal Imperial you'll see it just as an unlock because you'll do like Imperial Rangers and a Steel Legion as your unlocks or your mainstays, and then you'll do Steel Legion and a Hunter Cadre. Maybe that's it. I think it'll still be one of the least played units in the army, just because of that contention for the heavy slot and just needing to come in to get your value. And unlike a monster who comes in as a heavy, they're just gonna get chip damaged. I think a better change for them would have been some of the stuff they're doing across other units in the game now, where you get like Tenacious 2 versus Volley. Because that's the main thing I think you're worried about with Steel Legion is just, them getting picked away before they even get into battle. Because they can come onto the board plenty fast with Vanguard and stuff from the Imperial Officer, but if you lose a stand before they get into combat, it feels really bad. And there's no real way um, around that. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Overall, great update. Glad to see what they're doing with 100 Kingdoms. Let me know if you want me to look at another faction at all. I play with a lot of Nords, or I do dabble in some city states, so I have some thoughts about those ones as well. But 100 Kingdoms for sure is my main faction, and I think they've just solidly nailed it here. All right, you all have a great day.